Hey there, folks. How are you? Nice to see you, Lindsay.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How's it going in New Jersey future land?
Busy, but great. There's a lot going on.
Okay.
A lot going on, which is good. DP is doing a lot, so there's a lot to respond to, a lot of information to get out there. So happy to talk about some of it tonight.
Okay. So glad I don't know, that new rule, which I just learned about. I'm not sure how that's relevant, but since you had worked so hard here on that, and I'm not sure that there's a relationship with the flood zone overlay.
Not necessarily, since it's very specific to Jersey City and our zoning, but the stormwater control ordinance that I did work on, because it was municipalities were required to update their ordinance in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And those new rules required green infrastructure for development. So again, related, but that's all municipalities had to update their ordinances. So green infrastructure is required. And now with the inland flood protection rules, they're going to go a step further with stormwater management requirements. So they have to incorporate the latest climate science in terms of projected current and projected precipitation models. So basically, properly sizing stormwater management systems to account for climate change.
Well,
So,
that's very exciting. I think
yeah,
everyone was tap, tap, tap waiting for that, right? A little bit.
yeah, yeah. There was the executive order back in 2019 from the
Mm-hmm.
governor that, there was a directive to DEP to do an overhaul of all of their different program areas and rural areas and evaluate them for how they can better incorporate the latest climate science. So from then till now, yeah, it's been over 2 years. And
Okay.
they were going to issue the rules as emergency rules over the summer, but they decided to hold off and just go through the regular rulemaking process, which includes a longer comment period, which is that's what we're in right now. And that comment period will end February 3rd. DEP will review all of the comments that they got at their hearing last week and written comments that, like I said, are due February 3rd, and they'll have to respond to those and should be effective. The rule should be effective sometime in the spring. Don't know the exact date. Kind of just depends how quickly they can get through all of the comments.
Okay, great. So why don't, in the context of how you're going to do what you're going to do this evening, sort of bring that up, circle back to it to let people know what the heck we're talking about here and how maybe they, if they wish to do that, can still offer public comments. If would coach them a little bit along the lines of why that would be important. I'd like to, and this is a small group, so there's an opportunity for folks to, if you would, just put your contact information by way of an attendance record in the chat. If you're affiliated with a group, better still, um, versus going around and saying hello individually. We'll leave more time at the end so folks can introduce themselves and ask some questions. But Linz, if you would kick off with, introducing yourself, because you would probably do it better than I would, and just let people know what you do and what you're going to talk about tonight, we can get started.
Great. Am I able to share my screen?
I think, did I give that to you? Let me make sure. Yes, we did.
Perfect.
So what do you do? Who are you these
Just,
days?
just getting myself set up. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsey Sigmund. I'm a program manager with New Jersey Future. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the work we're doing in the stormwater water infrastructure space, share some resources we have. But to back up, I'll tell you a bit about New Jersey Future. So for those of you who aren't familiar, New Jersey Future envisions healthy places for our residents, visitors to live, work, and play, where communities have safe streets and clean waterways that are free from flooding and pollution. We are a nonprofit based in Trenton, New Jersey, but we work all across the state on various issues such as stormwater management, stormwater utilities, smart growth, transportation advocacy, all that good stuff. Me in particular, I oversee our mainstreaming green infrastructure program. So we work to bring innovative stormwater management practices like green infrastructure to the forefront of private development and public projects primarily. So I'll be sharing some information on our work on green infrastructure. I could talk a little bit about our stormwater utilities work, resources we have, the Jersey Waterworks Collaborative. And at the request of Deb, I have a few slides on the inland flood protection rules, and happy to talk about the implications of that rule change on the local level, especially in Jersey City. Before I joined New Jersey Future, I was the environmental planner for Jersey City, so very familiar with the awesome city of Jersey City. So I know I'm sure you're all familiar with what green infrastructure is, but I think it's sometimes good to, take a step back and bring it back to the basics. So what is green infrastructure? It's an approach to managing stormwater by either enabling it to infiltrate into the ground where it falls or capturing it for later reuse or delayed release. Some practices that you may be familiar with: bioswales, green roofs, enhanced stormwater tree trenches, curb bump outs. There's a lot of those throughout Jersey City. All the bollards you see, there's an opportunity to make those permanent and install green infrastructure. It's a really common solution in more densely populated cities like Jersey City. And permeable pavement is another one, or porous asphalt. There's a couple different versions.
Lindsay, let me just ask you before we get started, do you prefer to have people, because this is a small group?
Yeah, feel free if you have a question. Feel free to stop me.
To jump in? Okay.
Yeah.
So here's an obvious question. Urban forestry is not considered necessarily by some as green infrastructure. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about our green infrastructure toolkit, and that's a good example. So trees technically are not green infrastructure how DEP defines them in terms of meeting your stormwater management obligations. For example, a stormwater control ordinance, you have to refer to DEP's best management practices manual that outlines all of the green infrastructure practices that would, count towards meeting your requirements. And technically, just a tree without another enhancement is not considered green infrastructure. Personally, and I'm sure you all agree, like there are many co-benefits of trees. So I think a way to bring those ideas together and you have the co-benefits is when you're designing green infrastructure like bioswales and green roofs and other things, that trees are a part of that solution. You have to have a little extra to be able to detain additional stormwater as required by a DEP. But I hope that explains it a bit, and feel free, just let me know if that wasn't clear.
No, it explains it. I don't agree with that because green infrastructure is considered in many ways as a mitigation effort or kind of an adaptation strategy in some circles, and depending on
I guess it
so
depends.
is urban forestry and trees, right?
Yeah, sorry, I mean to interrupt you. I guess it depends what problem you're trying to solve. I think it makes sense to address multiple issues, and green infrastructure and trees do just that. But if you're looking to meet your DEP or your state mandated stormwater requirements, you'll have to follow the best management practices manual. But if you're also creating a climate resilience strategy, looking at trees and just green space in general, you have all those other co-benefits, like not just climate mitigation, but adaptation, carbon sequestration, all of those awesome things that a lot about, Deb.
Yeah, but it was really interesting to know that that's how DEP defines it. So that's important to understand. Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we're facing a growing problem. We have heavier and more frequent rain. Sorry, I have your want to block. Heavier and more frequent rain. We have increased impervious cover, generates more stormwater. We have more frequent flash flooding, and it leads to street closings, property damage, combined sewer overflows that you experience there in Jersey City, damaged infrastructure, impaired waters. But an important figure to point out, from 1958 through 2012, the amount of heavy rain events has increased by 71% in our region. That's what that map is showing.
Wow.
Now, it's important to note that green infrastructure won't capture hurricane events, but it can capture the 1, 2, 3-inch rain events, which make up 90% of the rainfall events that we see and cause those major damages and nuisance flooding from day to day. So why green infrastructure? We were just talking about this a bit. There are many co-benefits to green infrastructure. Environmental, obviously, we have improved water quality, cleaner air, reduced urban heat island. Economic benefits, we have construction cost savings, maintenance costs. It's all about capturing more stormwater, decreasing the amount of stormwater that enters the system to decrease those maintenance costs. We also have higher property values, creates jobs. And then we have public health benefits, safer neighborhoods. And if you couple them with, complete streets policy, which you have that pictured there, you have a bike lane with bioswales. You could also, have slower and safer streets. And streets are a large percentage of a municipality's impervious cover. So there are a lot of opportunities to plant trees, bioswales along the right of way that a municipality typically owns the majority of the right of way. In Jersey City, the only county road is JFK. All the other roads are managed by the city, with the exception of, the Turnpike extension and those highways. So one tool I wanted to talk a little bit about that we have at New Jersey Future is the Green Infrastructure Municipal Toolkit. The link is there. And of course, I'll share these slides after, but it's gitoolkit.njfuture.org. And it's a resource that was launched a few years ago that we are in the process of updating just to coincide with some of the changes on the state level requirement wise. But its purpose is to provide resources for municipalities and community groups and members for green infrastructure related work. There's policy resources, planning, implementation, and maintenance. There are a couple tabs up top that you can click through. There's more information on the New Jersey stormwater rules. And like I said, planning and maintenance and other resources. There's information on the benefits of green infrastructure that we just went through. There's, like I said, information to help you plan and implement and sustain or maintain green infrastructure. There's also a lot of information on the common facts and myths around green infrastructure I think are useful if you're advocating for a particular project that includes green infrastructure or should include green infrastructure. There's also information on funding. There are many programs listed ranging from 10,000 to 5 million that can help fund green infrastructure projects. So you could sort by project type or phase, the funding type you're looking for, federal, state, or private, and you can filter by eligible activities. So that's a resource. Another separate resource we have is a Stormwater Utility Resource Center. So if you're not familiar with what a stormwater utility is, I'll back it up a little bit. I just wanted to share this resource as well because it's similar to how it's set up similarly to the Green Infrastructure Toolkit, but specifically about stormwater utilities.
So just quickly, these GI toolkit, does it offer a way, because that's been a little bit of a hurdle to show municipalities how to measure the impact of green infrastructure? There's more confidence, for example, in metrics associated with gray infrastructure. Those calculations seem to be what people are most comfortable with. It does the toolkit sort of bridge that?
There's more higher level information speaking to that and talking points, but especially since DEP has updated their requirements for stormwater management for both private and public development, design engineers and municipal engineers are required to get training on green infrastructure. So I really think there's been a huge paradigm shift, and of course more work to be done, but I think it's more common now that people see green infrastructure as a part of their stormwater management system. And there's plenty of, engineers that understand that all the calculations behind that and can speak to that. I think
okay, so a paradigm shift, that's a big announcement.
Well,
That's cool.
You've been seeing it over the past couple of years.
I haven't noticed it a paradigm shift. I've noticed that there's been more of a mandate coming out of DEP, but people who don't necessarily believe as much in the efficacy of green infrastructure versus engineered solutions are still standing in that box.
Well, I think it's huge that DEP made the shift to require green infrastructure, and that most of the development community that I've worked with is in support of that. There is a resource that I'll share a little bit later on that New Jersey Future developed with the development community called the Developer's Guide for Green Infrastructure, and there's a lot of resources in there about the stormwater rule and how to comply, like what has changed since 2020, and provides information on how to implement green infrastructure based on the project type. You know, you have more urban areas like Jersey City compared to more suburban, so there are different opportunities depending on, you know, the property type and the town that you're working in, and that's what that resource, like I said, it was with the New Jersey, I don't know if I said this, it's with the New Jersey Builders Association that we worked on that with, which I think is huge that they, you know, co-authored this really important resource.
Great. Keep going. Thanks.
So something that we haven't seen a full shift towards, because we don't have any stormwater utilities established in New Jersey yet. What is a stormwater utility? It's a dedicated funding mechanism specifically enacted to address stormwater issues. So it's similar to a water or sewer utility bill that you get in the mail, but it's specific for stormwater and the amount of stormwater your property generates based on the amount of impervious cover you have. New Jersey's legislation that was passed in 2019 provides that funds collected can only be used to pay for stormwater purposes. So it would be a dedicated source of funding for stormwater management, and I'll explain a little bit more. So talking a bit more about the enabling legislation and some, you know, basic information on the mechanics of stormwater utilities. The legislation is called the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Act. It was signed into law by Governor Murphy in 2019. It's permissive, meaning it allows but does not require local governments to establish stormwater utilities. If established, stormwater utilities are required to collect fees based on the amount of stormwater a property generates. So typically that's a function of how much hard or impervious surfaces are on the property. So that includes roofs, driveways, all of that. In terms of establishment, utilities can be created by municipalities, it could be counties, it could be a region, so it could be a group of municipalities, and storage and improvement authority. So that would, for Jersey City, that would be JCMUA. And as I mentioned earlier, and can't stress enough, that funds generated from the utility fees are dedicated solely to stormwater management and cannot be used for any other purposes. Across the country, there are close to 2,000 stormwater utilities throughout the country, serving communities ranging in size from 88 people in Indian Creek Village, Florida, to 3 million in Los Angeles, California. And as you can see on the maps here, stormwater utilities have grown greatly in the past 20 years, because we have 2009 compared to 2019. And yeah, and as you can see in New Jersey, there are 0. But
Wow.
there are a couple of towns that we know are in the process, but no one has, you know, shared publicly where they're at in that process. But if Jersey City is interested, we have this Stormwater Utility Resource Center that goes over, you know, overviews. There's legal information, financial information, outreach, case studies, all of that good stuff. So
Isn't there
thought I'd
even
share that.
money out there nowadays to actually do a study as to whether that could work for your municipality?
Yes. So the grant did close in November, but DEP did issue a grant for a feasibility study, because that's the first step, is to understand what your stormwater management system is and to create a formula based on the property type. So you can get a sense of, this is what it would cost for this type of property owner a year. Typically it ranges from like $4 to $10 a month, sometimes even for the entire year. It really depends on the community, and that's the purpose of the feasibility study, to assess what that fee would be property to property in that specific town. So DEP issued that grant. They haven't announced who got the award yet, but we'll see. I think I heard sometime in March or March or April, they'll announce. But there's also Flood Defense New Jersey, and I think there's going to be some funding through there. But happy to keep you updated if I hear of any funding sources that come up for feasibility studies, if you want to pass the word along.
Yeah, would you know, just out of your affiliation with Jersey City, if we applied to do a feasibility study here?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually.
Okay,
but
thank you.
I think the folks that would know would be, you know, MUA or the mayor's office. They would know. yeah, if you need some resources to make the case, that's what this resource center is. And I will be the point person for now going forward at New Jersey Future for stormwater utilities. So if you have any questions going forward, feel free to send me an email.
Okay. It was the case that Mo was spearheading some of this conversation, and has that sort of consolidated under you now?
So Mo wasn't, because, Mo is really active in Jersey City as a resident and activist, but she no longer works for New Jersey Future. Is
Right.
that's
So
what
the
you're asking?
sewage-free streets and rivers and the
It
community
was
groups that were under that, would they now be working with you?
so sewage free is focused on combined sewer overflows. Um,
The last rounds of conversation we had about stormwater utility was sort of to press out on various municipalities that we lived in to consider this. So we actually had that conversation under sewage-free
oh, that's great.
streets
I mean, that
and
makes
yeah,
sense. There's already that relationship with the partners of sewage free. I'm backing up a little bit. I've only been with the organization for about 6 months, so still getting some of that background information. There are a lot of different program areas, but good to know. But I guess officially I'd be the point person for New Jersey Future on stormwater utilities, but sewage free, lots of resources, lots of connections with community groups. So that's great that that's being, it makes sense that it's part of the conversation, because when this infrastructure upgrades, once they happen, how will they be maintained? So stormwater utilities are, again, that dedicated funding source that could help maintain these huge overhauls of infrastructure that we're going to see over the next 5+ years in CSO communities.
yeah, and you
Does that
need
make sense?
community buy-in, right?
Right. So that's that on stormwater utilities. I know it's hard to talk about that topic in just a couple of minutes. I spoke about this a little bit, the New Jersey Developers Green Infrastructure Guide. This was developed, like I said, by New Jersey Future and the New Jersey Builders Association to provide green infrastructure guidance in the context of private development. So it has guidance depending on the type of development, the land available, information on how to comply with the new stormwater rules, all that good stuff. So that's also, you can download the PDF of that on the Developers Green Infrastructure Guide website. That's all available.
So here's a question for you related to that. The
Yeah.
last conversation I had with MUA here with Joe and with Richie, the conversation, and this was some number of months ago, or that developers are confused by the new DEP mandate around how to comply. And, on the other hand, having a conversation with a couple of developers who reference this, one, of course, being George Vallone, Hoboken Brownstone, who chaired that working group to develop this. He was, perplexed because he thought that this document, which is considered best practices document, pretty well lays out for developers up, down, and around. Have you heard anything about developers being a little bit confused about how to comply with the DEP mandate?
Yeah, I think there is still some training that needs to happen, whether that's provided by DEP or some other channel. But yeah, there appears to be at times a disconnect between design engineers that are working with developers and then municipal engineers who end up reviewing the projects. They could disagree on what is considered a best management practice. I'll give you an example of porous asphalt. Some engineers don't like porous asphalt because there aren't a lot of companies available to come out and maintain porous asphalt. You have to vacuum it out every year to make sure it's functioning properly. Sometimes there are other areas of a local ordinance that hasn't caught up to the stormwater rules. There may be some towns may require a design waiver or a variance for certain types of green infrastructure, which shouldn't happen because the stormwater rules administered by the state supersede that. If it's permitted by the state, it should be permitted in a locality. So yeah, I think there's still some kinks to work out. And I think it really depends on, if a municipality has in-house engineers that review a development proposal or if they outsource to another engineering firm. Really depends, but that's something that we're starting to talk to DEP with, and I work with Georgia, New Jersey Future still in this new role, on having some additional training. The training requirements for design engineers that are reviewing these projects really isn't robust. So yeah,
You
that's
mean
part
the
of our work.
design engineers working for the developers?
Now, municipal engineers reviewing them. I guess it's
Design engineers working for the municipality.
it's twofold. I think it really, again, it depends, but I've heard that sometimes review engineers on the municipality end and design engineers it depends. Sometimes it's the reverse, but there
Okay,
seems to be a disconnect at times about how to interpret the rules. So that's something that we've been thinking about as well. So that's not necessarily good to know that you've been seeing the same thing, but validating that you've been hearing that as well.
thank you.
I'll talk a little bit about Jersey Waterworks. Jersey Waterworks is a collaborative working to transform New Jersey's inadequate water infrastructure through sustainable and cost-effective solutions. That's the website, jerseywaterworks.org. New Jersey Future, we provide the backbone staff support for the Jersey Waterworks Collaborative. So we have some of our staff that attend the various committees that you can get involved in. Yeah, this is just some of the purpose, the underlying purposes of Jersey Waterworks, working to have smart combined sewer overflow control plans, successful and beneficial green infrastructure, working with stakeholders, and creating effective and financially sustainable water infrastructure systems. There, you can get involved by joining a committee. We have an asset management and finance committee, which also has a stormwater utility subcommittee. There's the overall green infrastructure committee that has 2 different subcommittees right now. I could talk a little bit about. There's a newer climate resilience committee and a combined sewer overflow committee, which is definitely, all of these are relevant to Jersey City, but as a CSO community, the CSO committee is pretty relevant for this community. And again, these are open for anyone to join. You just have to sign up on jerseywaterworks.org/committees. Yeah, that's how you can get the most involved. Once we're in the new year, the first meeting of the year will be for each committee will be about creating the work plan for 2023. So outlining some goals for the next year. So those will be worked out in the next month or two and posted online if you want to keep up with that. And there's a conference every year. I mean, that's the flyer from 2020, but we have it every year. Way to connect with others. One example I'll share, I mentioned the Green Infrastructure Committee has 2 subcommittees. One of those is the Water Risk and Equity Map. So the whole purpose of this subcommittee, I work with Rutgers to create this Water Risk and Equity Map, acknowledging that New Jersey faces a wide range of water-related risks from flooding near rivers, sea level rise, the presence of lead and other contaminants in drinking water. These and other issues affect people differently in different parts of the state. So this map contains information to help residents, advocates, and policymakers understand water risks in their communities. So you can overlay like CSOs, lead service lines, flood risk, and other parameters to see how these risk layers, how these risks layer on top of each other and show inequities in water risk exposure. So it's njwaterequity.rutgers.edu. We also just added, it wasn't shown on the previous slides because we just updated the toolkit. There is now a landing page for the map. So that's a part of the toolkit now.
The GI toolkit.
Yeah. So just an easier way to find it if you do not want to go to multiple sites, you could just go to the toolkit and there's a map tab up top.
That's really good. So quick question for you about this. Would you say that lay people can interact with this map easily?
Yeah, it's similar to the flood mapper tool and other tools that Rutgers have developed. I think it's pretty intuitive, but there's also, we have on the GI toolkit, there's a video, the tutorial. It's like 5-6 minutes long that'll walk you through how to use the map.
Okay, great.
Another tool that was developed is Jersey Water Check, where you could see couple different pieces of information. You could see who your water provider is. You could see how your community scores on other parameters like stormwater planning. You could see how many communities have updated their stormwater control ordinance to meet DEP requirements. You could see how many exceed the requirements, for example. So that's another tool. It's njwatercheck.com that was developed with one of the committees. This one I'm not as familiar with, so apologies if I can't answer a question, but there's also a lead and drinking water task force working to replace lead service lines in New Jersey, which are in Jersey City, Newark, and other communities.
Linz, what was the?
Can I just ask
Because
a question?
we're doing rapidly here. What was NJ Water Check?
Deborah, hey, this is Philippe here. Just quick thing. There's some questions online on the chat as well. Just wanted to let you know, Deborah, Lindsay.
Oh, awesome.
We're going to go through those one more time.
Okay, I think let's add a question as well.
Yeah, no, we got that. What was NJ Water Check again?
So NJ Water Check, it is technically a map of New Jersey, but you can search for your community and see who your water provider is, who your sewer service provider is as well. And there's a it's called the Benchmark Hub. You'll see when you pull up the site where you can look at other parameters to see how municipalities are doing different benchmarking. I use the green infrastructure example. You can see how many municipalities are complying with the new stormwater rules, which I will happily report is over 500. Almost all municipalities have updated their stormwater control ordinance. So we keep that updated on an annual basis. Next will be, keeping track of the lead service lines that are replaced, which will be a really valuable data point to track. So this is something that's updated annually with the subcommittee of Jersey Waterworks, and that's the Asset Management and Finance Committee that created this tool.
Got it. So Melissa, you had a question about CSOs? What, could you unmute and ask your question?
What is a CSO?
Oh, I'm sorry. A CSO it stands for Combined Sewer Overflow. So there are 21 municipalities in New Jersey that are considered a CSO community. These are typically more historic cities that have older water infrastructure systems. So if you have a combined sewer system, if you have a heavy rainfall event, what will happen is the system becomes overwhelmed with stormwater and wastewater coming from homes and businesses. So how you flush your toilet, it's supposed to go to the wastewater treatment center. When you have a heavy rainfall event, the system reaches capacity, and these two sources of water, wastewater and stormwater, combine and discharge into the local water body, which for Jersey City would be the Hackensack or the Hudson, depending on where it exits. So not great. So you end up with wastewater in your streams and rivers, and that obviously has negative implications for water quality. So all CSO communities in New Jersey are under a consent decree they've all issued a long-term control plan. So a plan to upgrade infrastructure to decrease the amount of combined sewer overflows that are experienced each year. So for the next step is DEP is going to be issuing permits. They haven't issued New Jersey cities yet. I'll be sure to let Deb know once I know. And that will outline all of JCMUA's responsibilities for the next year as part of their 5-year long-term control plan, and how to, again, accomplish decreasing the amount of combined sewer overflows. And green infrastructure is a part of that. Could be more always, but they're also looking at just separating the sewer system, storage tanks, other things like that, just to decrease the amount of stormwater that's entering the system, so we don't have these combined sewer overflow events, which are not pleasant and really bad for water quality.
So what I understand in Jersey City, in its mix of alternative solutions, is committed to 8% green infrastructure, but I understand there's no municipality in the state that's committed to more than 10%. So for the most part, these long-term control plans, folks, unless, something shifted, Lindsay, are mostly engineered solutions or gray infrastructure solutions, correct?
Correct. The majority will be gray infrastructure.
Okay. And just to, was it Terry or was it Dilip who pointed out that there were questions in the chat?
Should I stop sharing my screen for a moment so we can?
Well, I'm
Each other?
just, someone pointed out, I wasn't sure who spoke up, that there were questions in the chat. The only question I saw there was, what is a CSO by Melissa? So if we're missing anything, does anyone have a question now that they'd like to
I had a question.
share?
This is
Okay,
Stephanie.
great.
I had a question and I just deleted it because I wasn't sure if we were saving them till the end. But I had a question just about the stormwater runoff and the fees and just how that would be measured and implemented. I know it's in the infancy stages, but I guess like what would that look like? Because my PSE&G bill is always wrong. So like what would something like that look like for like a resident, and then just kind of the overall plan of that?
Yeah, so municipalities first aren't required to issue a stormwater utility or enact a stormwater utility. It would depend if there was interest in Jersey City as a city and the MUA and starting to explore that. And if there is interest, they would undergo a feasibility study. And that study would tell you just that, how much will I have to pay for this fee. So yeah, it creates this formula based on the type of property and the amount of stormwater that's generated, and that fee would come in your mail just the same as your water and your sewer bill comes in. It'll obviously be lower if you're a small property. If you're a renter, it really depends on what the building owner decides to do, if they decide to incur that cost or if it's passed on to the renter. It really depends. And I think a lot of those questions, like I said, are answered through a feasibility study, but I've heard it could be like even just $9 a year. But if you have a larger property like the Hudson Mall, they're going to have to pay a larger fee.
Of course,
It's just, it's understood, because a way of thinking about it is you're already paying for stormwater management through property taxes and other
Right,
fees.
yeah.
So this way it's a more equitable, approach. If you have, because everyone's basically paying the same amount, it doesn't matter how much impervious cover you have. So that's
Right.
how it's thought of as an equitable approach to assessing that fee.
Okay,
Right.
thank
So,
you.
so for example, people who you use the framing of Hudson Mall, but parking lots, right? All of that is not now being assessed for their contribution, if you will, of stormwater into the sewer system. So, that's like a big missing. So trying to bring everybody to the table and make it more equitable. I don't know, it seems like it's a pretty good idea to me, but I think folks need to understand, the numbers. $9 is not a lot. I think people are worried that it's going to be a lot of money.
There's also, I didn't mention this, there's also credits built into the enabling legislation that would have to be built into the stormwater utilities. So if a project has a stormwater management system, they're eligible for a credit. I believe there are income-based credits. There are ways of, working with that as well. So that's something to consider. I don't think we've added this resource yet. We should be adding it soon to the Stormwater Utility Resource Center. That talks about all these credits and the fee structure that I'll share with you once it's posted. But I think the Stormwater Utility Resource Center is awesome. I'm happy to say that. I mean, I didn't create it. I think it's awesome. And it has a lot of those resources on there.
So when you send through your PowerPoint, everyone who's, I have everyone's contact information who's on the call tonight. I'll share the PowerPoint with
Awesome.
them, which has these resource links so people could educate themselves further.
Yeah, and encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, New Jersey Future and Jersey Waterworks. You'll get up with Jersey Waterworks specifically if you're interested in those committees. It has all the upcoming committee dates in there, lots of interesting articles, blog posts, and upcoming events and all that good stuff. So,
Okay, cool.
yes,
So
that's
could we talk about just circle back to the rulemaking?
sure.
Excuse me, the new DEP rule, and if there's something that we should all know about or act on?
Yeah, I have a couple of slides here I presented briefly just internally to my staff just to give them an update about what's going on. So NJ Pact, so New Jersey Protecting Against Climate Threats. The Inland Flood Protection Rule is the first phase of that. So I'll back up a little bit. So based on observed climate change and projected climate change impacts in New Jersey, sea level rise, more frequent and intense storms, increased temperatures. Governor Murphy passed Executive Order number 100, which led to NJPAC, New Jersey Protecting Against Climate Threats, where DEP and other state agencies were evaluating their programs and policies to ensure that the latest climate science is incorporated into their, their rules, their decision-making process. So this is phase 1 of NJPAC that is in the comment period right now. So the inland flood protection rule would ensure that, and this would back up a little bit, sorry, that this inland flood protection rule, the reason this was phased is really in reacting to Ida. And I mean, Jersey City, of course, was impacted, but we saw flooding in our inland areas, which we don't always think of as being the most susceptible to flooding since they're not tidally influenced. But, targeting our inland areas ensures that areas at most significant risks are better defined and that new and reconstructed assets in these areas are designed and constructed using the best available climate-informed precipitation data. So using the best data available is critical to protecting New Jersey's assets, economy, and above all, people from the catastrophic effects of worsening floods. For example, Ida case studies show average elevations of 3 feet above FEMA's 100-year flood elevation. All to say the current flood hazard areas, that we're using are out of date and don't reflect what we're seeing now, what's projected into the future. So the idea is we need to design our infrastructure, our homes, our roadways, our stormwater management systems to account for this additional rainfall that we're seeing. So for buildings, that means raising buildings, same for roads, but for stormwater management systems, it means oversizing them more than we are now to be able to handle increased quantity of stormwater. So this is just an overview of the rural areas that are being affected by the inland flood protection rules. So for the stormwater rules, this piece is relevant to Jersey City because you have stormwater management rules, as any municipality does. So now it will require stormwater best management practices, BMPs, including green infrastructure, to be designed to manage runoff for both today's storms and projected future storms. And how they do that, there's this precipitation adjustment factor table provided by DEP that I don't think we really need to fully understand, but is required for the design engineers to use to design their BMP. So that would apply to Jersey City. I don't know when
So
municipalities.
projects would be approved or not on that basis.
So I don't know. Yes, I just don't know when municipalities are required to update their local ordinance, because until it's updated in Jersey City's code, developers aren't going to use it. And I don't know if they're going to wait until the next phase of NJPAC, which will also impact stormwater rules. They're going to start that process in the spring. If they're going to do it all at once, if that makes sense. So when the last stormwater rules, the current stormwater rules were updated by the state in 2020, municipalities had a year to update their local ordinances. So when the inland flood rules go into effect, are municipalities going to have 1 year? Are they going to have 2? I don't know. That's a question I've had for DEP. So that piece.
When do these first phase rules go into effect?
Good question. I have that question as well. So they had a public hearing last week on the 11th where you could provide testimony, but written comments are due February 3rd. Comments are due February 3rd. We're submitting comments. I'm happy to share those. We post them to our website anyway. If you want to take a look at what we're, concerned about, or we're strongly in support of the rules. We think it's awesome. We're way ahead of the curve. I don't know of any other state that's really doing this. So it's very exciting. It's just just certain questions like, how is this going to roll out? And what is phase 2 going to look like? So once the comment period ends on February 3rd, they have to go through all the comments and respond to them. But I have heard early second quarter, so May-ish, that these rules will officially go into effect. But again, I'm wondering the same thing. It depends how quickly they do it.
Could you add to the second page of this, where on the New Jersey Future website, you're posting?
Yeah, for sure.
What you just shared, your comments to this, so people can learn from that?
Yeah, I could put it in the chat. I could also send you an email after. It's a bunch of other, it's
So
all of our.
It won't, get lost. Is there something that you would recommend people sort of logging into to offer their own comments? Is that website link here?
I don't know if it's at this link and you could follow it directly. Let's see. Well, that didn't work. I'll find it because there is a place that you'll have to. Why can't I see? There's you submit them digitally on this portal. Like you put your name, contact information, and your comments. Again, end of day, February 3rd. But I could send that link to you as well. I'll put it in the chat and follow up an email. Where we put our testimony and comments and where you could submit
Right.
comments.
Good. So when you send this and that in the email, then I'll pivot and send it to everybody on the call.
Sounds good. The other area is the flood hazard area control rules. This will not affect Jersey City because this is not a riverine area technically. Hackensack and Hudson are tidally influenced. So Jersey City development will be impacted in phase 2. What I'm hearing, I think it's an additional 4 to 5 feet over the current flood elevation. So the first floor habitable area will have to be raised like an additional 4 feet. Over
Really?
what? Mhm.
Wowzy.
Yeah, and I question, are certain urban areas exempt from that there are questions, because obviously Jersey City is not the same as like LBI where you see houses on stilts. So you can't really do that. You also don't want to lose like the character of, the historic districts in Jersey City, which are obviously mostly built out, but there are a couple lots here and there. So how do you have a desirable experience on the street if you have you don't want to have a door like 5 feet above the streetscape, that kind of, you know what I mean? That's not the experience people want to have in a city. So
Nor do they want to be flooded out.
Oh, of course. I just working in city planning with historic preservation, those are things you keep in mind.
Yes.
So yeah, that's just a thought. So don't have to worry about the flood hazard rules for now. That's the inland areas of the state. And yeah, if you have any questions about that as get closer to that, just let me know. But again, I'll share where to submit comments and where we're posting our own. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you. That was a, pretty comprehensive overview. New Jersey Future is extraordinary. It's all these tentacles that are, pushing out on great stuff and really well structured organization that everyday people could participate in if anybody's interested, right? So all those committees available to folks. But, I am hoping that it continues to be, effective. Are you feeling that you guys are building momentum? What are your sentiments these days with your work? Because you've been doing this for some years.
Yeah, I mean, it's different now. I mean, for 4 years, just working and focusing on Jersey City, now working across the state, it's obviously different. You can't get down to like the fine details per se, but the experience I had working on the local level, I'm able to bring that and like understand how all of these like state rules and things kind of trickle down, and use that to, shape our recommendations as a statewide organization. I think it's been valuable. And in terms of, how we're feeling about momentum, I think for years, DEP was kind of slow moving with certain things, but now there's so much happening at once. With the CSO permits coming out, there was the MS4 permit that came out, which is the Municipal Separate Sewer System. I might be missing an S. Mostly it's for municipalities that aren't combined sewer system communities, but there's this new requirement for them to do watershed level planning and, map all their water infrastructure and implement projects. So that's awesome. And now with the inland flood protection rules, there's just now so much happening at once, which is great, but, could be a little overwhelming after years of, things being a little slower moving. So
are you finding that? So two questions. When are the permits coming around?
The CSO.
Yes.
Well, the Jersey Waterworks Collaborative, Sewage Free, they've been pestering DEP for a year and a half plus now. But the first permit was issued, that's Guttenberg, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and avoiding saying it out loud. just north of you. Very small town, but them and their MUA issued one long-term control plan. So those two permits, one for the MUA, one for the city itself, township, were just issued. I don't know when the next one's coming out, but I think the fact that there's this permit, it kind of gives you a sense of what they're outlining for municipalities. And the one that we have reviewed for Guttenberg does include green infrastructure. This is a draft permit, so the public comment period is open. There is a hearing on Monday, one at 10 a.m. and one at 6 p.m., I believe. And if you're not engaged with that, I don't know if you have Suzanne at New Jersey Futures email. She took over Mo's work. If you're interested in engaging around that, I actually think they had a meeting tonight that overlapped with this one.
What is
But they're
Suzanne's last name?
Aptman,
Oh,
AFTMAN.
right. Okay. Mhm.
So definitely encourage you to be involved with that group as you have been, once Jersey City's permit comes out, because there'll be an opportunity to comment and provide recommendations and get into the details of the permit. I'll probably be reviewing in the green infrastructure lens and saying like, oh, they could do this earlier, whatever the case may be.
Okay. So you have 21 CSO communities, right, in New Jersey? Is that the count? So
think
just
so.
on the whole, are you finding that municipalities are really engaged around this conversation? Are
They
they
have-
leaning into resource, for instance, the GI toolkit and all your resources?
I don't know. I hope so. I haven't had a chance to work with across all of the CSO communities yet, but good point in your question. I think,
Just curious, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's one thing to have these resources in place and some alignment, and DEP at the table and, all of that.
yeah,
And-
we do our best to get the resources out there. And like I said, we're in the midst of updating them. It's just there is this whole other group, Sewage Free, and we have the CSO committee at Jersey Waterworks. They're really the ones who are the main resources for this work. So it doesn't mean we can't provide complementary efforts, but yeah, that's been their main issue area.
Okay. Well, good. This is a good update, questions from other folks who's maybe exposure to this, umbrella of entities, had been limited. You now have lots of stuff to read about and understand how all this is structured and the resources that are available and how the various arms of New Jersey Future are working together and pushing forward. Now, seemingly the DEP in alignment with that. So I don't know that we only have people from Jersey City on this call. Melissa, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, I see that. I see Glen Rock, where your
Yeah.
shade tree committee is working together or something.
Yeah, so we have 3 people
Cool.
here from Glenrock Shade Tree Committee.
Nice.
So we're creating a subcommittee that's going to look at like stormwater management and stuff like that. So we thought this would be a great thing to listen in on. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome. I actually got an email from, I don't know if they're on the Shade Tree Committee or Environmental Commission in Morris Township or Morristown. I kind of get them confused. It's like, why don't you have more resources on trees? I was like, you should meet Deb. You guys, because that's a good point. And
We're rowing, yeah.
and it's a good point because trees are green infrastructure. But again, as DEP defines it, technically, no, they need to have some accompanying what's it called, features to be considered green infrastructure. But
Well, what would those features be like? What, but when you say that accompanying features?
yeah, so just the way green infrastructure is designed with different layers of like mulching and soil designed in such a way to allow for stormwater to infiltrate slowly, as opposed to just straight soil or mulching that you would plant in a tree pit. It's good. You could do an enhanced tree pit that's designed in a way to detain the stormwater for longer. Usually there's other accompanying plants that,
Right.
yeah. So it's just really all in the design and the cost to install.
I mean, that's our major
infrastructure.
thing really for our town is really the cost, the will's there, I think,
Yeah.
but it really is just the money is the problem most of the time.
You know what's interesting, and speaking to both of those aspects, it seems like announcements about funding coming out of the EPA and the DEP now are coupling green infrastructure and urban forestry dollars, funding being made available. So while technically there's a distinction, I guess, but it seems like even with Reggie, you know, as an opportunity, which is the regional greenhouse gas.
Yeah, they just issued that
initiative.
today.
What was that?
They just issued the awards today, or announced who
Did
got the
they?
funding. They did.
Can you
don't-
forward me that too? That's great.
As I don't
But that's a
quiz
funding
me,
bucket,
but
and they are speaking to some of this now in a coupled fashion, green infrastructure and urban forestry. So that's the good news.
Right. So yeah, so the federal legislation that was passed, right? Like that money is going to the states. Has the state developed rules for like how, like, you know, for replacing your gas stove, or urban forestry stuff? The states are supposed to be getting money and then allocating that money towards those programs. Are those rules out? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm sorry, maybe it's just because I've been going since 8 a.m. Not making those connections in my head.
No,
I'm not familiar with
like the
you're talking
federal
like
infrastructure plan, right? It was passed.
oh, the IIJA
Yeah. So
and
like,
all of that.
so then that money is being allocated to the states,
Yes,
and they're going to
for
develop rules to disperse it. I was wondering if those rules had been developed.
so they'll need to establish some sort of plan around where those funds are going. I don't have much information beyond that, but I'm happy to look into it more. Like, what's the next
I don't
step
think they
there?
have come out yet, because like they have to provide
Well-
funding for like, replacing your gas stove, like all those.
Well, there's the American Rescue Plan funds. I don't know if there's so many different names for everything.
But
There's this whole
even
advocacy.
in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's green
Yeah.
infrastructure money.
Like, I don't know where to find all that stuff. Like it's a little.
That would be
It's-
a good resource, that a body of information for New Jersey Future to kind of, infrastructure funding.
That is, so we actually are doing like a funding navigator project to help municipalities apply for the funding, like know when it's coming out and apply. So more on that. We're hiring someone to specifically do that work. But yeah, it's called
Cool.
the intended use plan, or the state revolving fund, is what outlines which projects how they prioritize who gets funding when federal funding comes in. That's how the states receive federal funding, is through the state revolving fund. And then the intended use plan, there's one for drinking water and there's one for clean water. That outlines how they select the projects, and then eventually will identify which projects are getting funded on an annual basis. They have not announced exactly who is getting this round of funding, but I'm assuming they are prioritizing CSO communities to, help offset the costs, because otherwise who's paying for it? The ratepayers, the residents, for these upgrades. So yeah, I know the CSO communities, and likely Jersey City, I'm not exactly sure, at least PVSC, where Jersey City's wastewater goes, likely applied for funding. But yeah, it's the state revolving fund, and I'm blanking on the name of this campaign that New Jersey Future helps support. It's like Clean Communities, Green Jobs. I'll send you that link as well. But the whole point of that campaign was to advocate for the state to take the federal funding from the COVID relief bill and all these other bills and allocate it to, water infrastructure improvements, including green infrastructure.
What's the role of the infrastructure bank in this? Do you
So
know?
it's one and the same. So
The revolving fund and the infrastructure bank are one and the same.
So hold on, let me just get the right verbiage. Okay. Yeah, so the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank is the overall umbrella, and there are different loan programs. There's the New Jersey Water Bank and the New Jersey Transportation Bank, but we're talking about water here. So under the Water Bank, there's, the New Jersey Water Bank provides like the low cost state funds and loans for water infrastructure. And then this intended use plan, the state revolving fund, the plan to use the state revolving fund, that is worked on by the New Jersey Water Bank. So they're like the body of New Jersey that is in charge of allocating, doing that planning and allocating of those funds. It's not supposed to be straight, like it's not me, it's not you. This is it's complicated. So that's why we have this funding navigator program and this new position to help municipalities better understand it, because those are the entities who will then have to apply for this funding. One of our
Well,
main
that's
comments
brilliant.
was,
That's going to be a great project.
yeah, so I'll keep you updated on that. I'm like not directly involved, but it's green infrastructure. Again, the whole purpose of the program is like identify opportunities to integrate green infrastructure. So I kind of get pulled into different things, which is great, but not always privy to the latest. But yeah, I'll keep you
Very good.
updated on that.
Thank you. Really appreciate this, Lindsay. This has been really informative.
Good, I'm glad. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm glad we were able to catch up on this. So we typically, we meet for an hour, sometimes based on Q&A, we extend it. If we're, good with no more questions, then, we'll all move on to a late dinner. Are we good, folks?
Yes, thank you very much. It was very informative.
Very good.
Good, I'm glad. Thank you so much. If you think of any other questions, just let me know. I put my email in the chat, but I'll send Deb the slides and those links. I should do that now so I don't forget what you're asking.
Yeah, so, if you send that to me tomorrow, because I'm not going to get to anything, but folks, as I get it, I'll pivot and send it off to you all.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Very
Appreciate your
good.
time.
Good night for now.
Good night. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.